Hi, I'm Gavin,
And I'm Dave.
and you're on the Fringe.
Come along with us for a ride on a podcast where we talk about an area or a thing going on in the world that needs more attention, just like you do. Let's go.
On the Fringe. Here we go.
Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of On the Fringe. This is Dave. I'm here with Gavin,
Whoa!
and we're going to be talking today about a recent move by DHS, the Department of Homeland Security in the United States, to prevent Harvard University from enrolling foreign students. So the Trump administration has attempted to block Harvard from enrolling international students for the fall. The university's had over 6,700 international students come in last year. They're from 160 different countries around the world. And this is big news, as you guys can imagine, not just in the US, but in every corner of the world. Right, Gavin?
Yeah, as someone who teaches internationally, who works at international schools, this news has gone down like a bomb. This is very consequential, and the deadline's here. We're on the eve, literally, of this being implemented. And Harvard's not backing down. The Department of Homeland Security is not backing down. It seems likely to me that this is going to happen. And this has massive, massive consequences, not just for people outside of the US, but for people in the US. Now, before we go into that, Dave, let's just talk about real quickly who goes to Harvard. And this is, of course, a generalization because all kinds of people go to Harvard. But let's talk about some of the people who've been enrolled in Harvard, some of the people who are there now.
Well, I'm not going to be doing a 20-minute bio about myself because this does not include me, and I think this does not include the average American. So this is affecting primarily leaders, families, and the top, say, 1% of people in the world, the very, very wealthy people. So, for example, you've got Islam Karimov, former president of Uzbekistan. His daughter went to Harvard. You have
Mm,
Mark Carney. Maybe you've heard his name recently, Prime Minister of
mm,
Canada. His daughter, Raman Tata, the guy who founded the Tata Group. You have royalty. You have the current Empress of Japan that went there. You have Malaysian sultans. You have some brilliant Nobel Prize winning economists and biologists. Some are American, some are not American, but you have the top thinkers in the world in terms of academics and science and pushing the envelope that are attending this university. And they're very rich people that can just kind of buy their way in too.
You have elites, you have global elites. Um, yeah. And while people may look at this and go, well, I have no direct connection to these people, so this is not going to affect me. It really does. And a lot of that has to do with something that you may not immediately think of, which is branding. Um, what does the cessation of international students enrolling in Harvard, what does that do to the branding of Harvard? And what does that do to the branding of America?
Well, that's a couple of really big questions. I mean, the US has a huge part of its GDP is made up of exporting education, and that means that you have international students coming to the US to study.
Mm.
And we had more than 1 million international students in the country this year, last year. They've spent about $44 billion. So this is our 10th biggest export. It's a huge contributor to the US economy, and it's contributed to about 388,000 jobs. This isn't just at Harvard, this is at every single university across the US. A lot of these
And
students as well are paying tuition straight out of pocket. So 65% of them are just saying, okay, here's my out of state tuition money. My parents can afford it. I want to study at your university and I potentially want to work here after I graduate or take my skills back to my home country after I graduate and use them to get a job.
I think it's just worth mentioning. I mean, absolutely nailed it there. But this is something that really brings such value to America. I mean, just if you look at the numbers, and you're not even talking about the relationships, you're not even talking about the people, you're not talking about the diversity that's being brought in. We're just talking about the raw numbers. That's close to 500,000 jobs. That's $44 billion. Whatever way you look at it, it's a lot. The US exports quite a bit. The 10th biggest export, that's very significant. Uh,
Yes.
so how does this erosion of the brand, and I would describe it as eroding the brand because it does create a situation in which an outside observer is going to go, oh, we paid for this, we worked really hard, we got into Harvard, and that doesn't actually mean anything because of a political issue with the current administration. My status, my legal status in this country is now in jeopardy. I could be arrested just for showing up at the airport. People are not going to want to go. And that is currently what's going on. People who got in, who worked incredibly hard, who've applied legally, who've been accepted legally by DHS, are now going, I don't really know if I want to go because I don't know what my status is going to be when I show up. Now,
Mm-hmm.
Dave, am I right in assuming that that's a massive problem?
Well, yeah, I think nobody wants to be a pawn in a political game. And that's
Mhm.
what's happening here is you have the international students. Yes, Trump and the Trump administration is angry at Harvard for not releasing the identities of students that were protesting at events over the last year, year and a half. But all the other students that are not part of that are going, why am I going to put myself in a situation where somebody I have no connection to can ruin my whole entire future? Why am I going to go to the US and put myself in a position and put my whole family's lifetime savings into a position where I go for a year and then I have to transfer and I have to either redo a year or if I can't get into another university in the US, then I have to leave and I lose a year or more of my life, plus all of the money that they've spent. Maybe you've gone to Harvard, maybe you've gone to an Ivy League university for a year, and it's helpful, but it doesn't really do anything in terms of getting you a diploma. And that's really what these people are after. They're trying to get a diploma and they're trying to get some sort of an accreditation from the US that goes, I am educated from a top American university.
And this is a direct threat to that because it's essentially undermining the value of that education by making the end status uncertain. And it's worth noting, again, we mentioned we're on the eve of this coming into effect. This is not theoretical. There are already people going, I'm not going to be able to attend graduation. I'm looking for alternatives now. I'm in my third year. I'm in my second year. Some of the elites you just mentioned, they have kids who are maybe in their first, second year of university. They may be looking for an exit plan right now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and this is kind of a massive river to cross, but it's part of a much larger issue, which is the issue of expected infinite growth, which we do not have. Can you just talk about that a little bit, Dave?
Yeah, so I mean, if you look at the US education system, you look at colleges over the last 15, 20 years, they've grown significantly. And you have small town colleges, you have major universities, you have more American students that have been told, our generation included, that if you go to college, you get a degree, that you're going to be able to get a job. So families have saved all of their money to send their kids to school. People have taken out huge loans to study. And this is about to end in the US. So a lot of students now are seeing that it's not as important to go to university. I can get a job as a tradesman. I can get a job in something else in IT, and I don't have to go to college. So these universities are facing a huge demographic cliff. And
Mm.
we've set ourselves up in a way that this has to continue growing for the system to not break. And in a lot of smaller towns in the US, international students are coming in and they're paying thousands more dollars in out-of-state tuition than in-state students are, and they're essentially keeping some of these towns alive. And if these students don't see the value in an American education, or they see it's too risky, they're not going to come. And you're going to have the economies of these smaller towns in the US just completely dry up. It's going to be disastrous for the country if this happens.
And I think it's going to move very quickly, and you might not see it immediately, but you're absolutely right. Because Harvard is, whether you consider it justified or not, I'm not sure I do, but it is a flagship university. It is a flagship for the Ivy League. The Ivy League is a flagship for the country.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's how, again, whether it's intentional or not, that's how the value of American education gets sold abroad. This doesn't just undermine the value of Harvard's education, it undermines the value of American education because, and we've discussed this, uh, if this can happen to a university like Harvard, it can happen to any university. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Harvard is
Yep.
much less vulnerable to these kinds of political pressures than pretty much any other institution in America would be. They have a ridiculous endowment. They have an alumni that I wouldn't say protects them from a lot of things, but they have a very impressive, very politically powerful alumni. Let's just leave it there. Um, they have advantages. They have structural financial advantages that pretty much every other university in the country does not have. So if people see this happening to Harvard, they're going to go, okay, well, I'm applying to Boston University or I'm applying to Arizona State. Do I really want to risk it?
Mm-hmm.
And
Or you're going to something like, I'm going to Western Illinois University, or I'm going to Minnesota State University, Duluth, or Mankato, or some small
yeah,
town university where sometimes there's not enough students, and this has happened in the last few years. Small universities have actually closed. And if you're an international student and you go to a university that's shut down, what's the value of your diploma? Nothing. It's a basically $50,000 expensive, very expensive piece of paper that is essentially worthless.
and that is going to scare the absolute crap out of international students thinking about applying to the US because people don't think about this. These people take a very big risk coming to America, very far away from home. They're spending an incredible amount of money that, in some cases, may represent generational wealth. You may have 3 or 4 generations of people working to put this person through university. And now the idea that they could have expended all of this effort, all of this blood, sweat, and tears, and someone could just tear that paper up if someone else that they're not even connected to does something that someone in DC doesn't like, that's that's incredibly intimidating for so many people that
Mm-hmm.
they will simply not show up. The risk is no longer worth the value. And
Yep.
I think that's going to hit, again, as you mentioned, that's going to hit the American economy on a structural level. Um, but it's also going to just hit us in terms of soft power, in terms of establishing connections abroad.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, you've got study abroad programs all over the world. American students or universities tell students, and we as a country, I would say, are largely looking and going, we need our students to be well rounded. We need people to see what's going on and understand how the world works. And if you don't have these international students coming in, I mean, they bring
yeah.
a piece of their culture, they bring their language, they bring their identity to the US, and it makes it easy for Americans to connect with them and they can connect with America. And if you don't have these small connections, okay, you're going to have a few people that can still come in, but if it's not as big, you're not going to have as many opportunities for Americans to understand the world if you lose these connections and these students don't actually come.
And, I think I speak for the both of us when I say, man, what a terribly sad thing that would be.
Yeah, yeah, it would be. It really would be. And
Anyway,
yeah, it's kind of a sad, somber episode, but this could be an inflection point in the American education system. If Harvard and the DHS don't actually, nobody takes an off ramp, they both run into each other and they put up a fight, then this could be a huge change for education in the United States in the next, 2, 3, 4 years, and potentially looking into another administration as well. So,
and I think not just in America, but in the world.
mhm.
And right before we end, I think it's worth mentioning this is not going unnoticed abroad. People are very much paying attention, and I'm not just talking about individual international students or international elites looking to send their kids to America. I'm thinking about governments, and specifically a government in the People's Republic of China. Uh, Dave, what did the Hong Kong University of Science and Tech do?
Well, these guys are offering to help international students who study at Harvard, and they're either helping them get to Hong Kong to study there or helping them use their connections to get these students in a place where they're going to be able to study. And you look at this and go, okay, yeah, they're helping, international students, big whoop. But China is pushing to improve the perception of its universities worldwide. Maybe
Yeah.
not the quality, but the perception of Chinese universities. And doing something like this, I think Hong Kong University of Science and Tech, HKUST, is ranked maybe top 50 something. Harvard is in the top three
Yeah.
almost always.
Yeah.
So there's a gap, but this is an opportunity for HKUST to go, well, we're helping these students. We can take some of these students and also we can send them to other universities if they're not a good fit, and
Hmm.
we can raise our perception of the university in Hong Kong and in China and in Asia, and we can start to pull away some of these students that would normally want to study in the US. So then they can go, okay, we're going to have these greater minds. We can come out and innovate, and we can create programs like DeepSeek, which was made at the fraction of a cost of ChatGPT. China's pushing for AI development. I'm not going to go on with this for a long time, but this could be a huge win for the Chinese if they can
Yeah.
play this right, and if we just continue to push in the way that we're pushing.
I would say the phrase that comes to mind, Dave, is dropping the ball.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit of dropping the ball here. Anyways, on that somber note, please like, comment, subscribe. We appreciate all of our listener feedback. If you have any thoughts about this episode, which I know probably affects many of our listeners in one way or another, please write in, please comment. We always appreciate hearing from our community. If you like this episode and you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. You get a lot of juicy subscriber only material. So,
Mm-hmm.
thank you all so much. This is On the Fringe. Have a good one.